let's go into our visual scripting, which is nitty gritty of what we do. And then we got action, conditions, hotspots, and triggers. Let's start with the triggers. You see, a trigger will create a game object on your hierarchy, and it'll give you these options, right? You got different events. Triggers are in code, they're called events. And you got a bunch of them, a bunch of options, right? You got on the change of ambient sounds, on the change of master volume. You have on camera change, on change from specific shots. You got on becoming an NPC, and becoming a player, and becoming a model, on dying, reviving. You got a bunch of options on app focus, on enable, disable, interval, on vogue, and so on and so on. So what is the flow that we are supposed to do with Game Creator? The flow is that you have a trigger that consequently will call an instruction, right? On start is going to open a web page, and if I hit start, it's gonna open up a web page, which is this one. You see what it does? Calls an event which triggers a method. The method is running this website URL. This is where you set up, for example, I wanna jump. So if I put input, my button is gonna be set up to jump, which is you got default usage, which are built into the Unity input system. Let's say jump, and I change this to the jump action. My player, we got a player. If I hit this, we can jump, because my trigger is using an input to call the method of jumping, right? That's by pressing spacebar, which is the default jump. You also have a bunch of options, right? Input system, you got your keyboard keys, press on release, on timeout, while pressing it's gonna continue doing it, mobile, touch, and so on. You got a bunch of those. So this trigger will call a method, but sometimes you don't want it to call the method unless something happens, unless something is confirmed. That's why we have conditions. So what we do is we add a condition. So you got two ways of doing conditions. You can either branch them, which will create basically if statements. And an if statement works in the way that you have multiple options, and as long as one is true, it's gonna continue to perform that. If it's not true, then it's gonna continue to the next one until it finds a true statement. If it's not true, if none of them are true, it's gonna cycle back to the top and start over again. So if you want to have multiple options, but you gotta make sure and understand that you wanna have, it's if, right? It's if this is true, this happens. If this is true, it happens. If it's not true, this is not gonna happen, and it's gonna go look for the first one that can happen. You can also have an instruction called condition. It's called check condition, which basically it checks if this condition, for example, this shot is active. If we're using this camera shot, if this shot is active, then you can continue to cast from the abilities module. And if it's not true, then it's gonna get stuck there until it's true, right? You're gonna try and do this, and it's not gonna work until it's true. So this works kind of the same. The difference is conditions, you can have multiple options. This one will just not work because it doesn't have more options. What you do in this sense, you can call a condition. You run the condition, then you drag it into the slot. You can wait to finish or not. When you do wait for finish, what it means is that if I have another change the ambient volume here, he's gonna wait until this is processed. All of these conditions and branches and if statements are processed before it goes into this next instruction. If this is off, it's false, it's gonna run this and continue to run the other one simultaneously while this is running as well. So keep in mind that this wait to finish is just for you to better manage what happens between things, and if you need to wait for something to happen or not. right? So you got your conditions and then you got your actions, right? You can also have your own actions separately, and you can here call an instruction, right? A run instruction also, and then you can drag that instruction. If this has instructions here, right? This has instructions here also, and this has instructions here also. Why do I want to have them separate in separate components? This is why. I have a trigger, and then I want to create a condition, and then I'm going to create an action, right? And I'm going to have multiple actions, and all these actions do different things. Just imagine these all do different things. And then this condition has multiple things that it's going to do. So instead of just adding them here, right, I can convert all these actions into prefabs, save them, and then I can reuse them. And then instead of having them all here, right, I can just call the action and just bring the action in here, right? I can select the action, run the action from a game object, and just run that action from a prefab. And I can have things saved and just run them manually through these calls. And then I'll just I can just remove this here, right? And just drag my condition in here. And I have it separate. And if I have, for example, another trigger, and I want to use different trigger but the same condition, I can just drag in the same condition. It's gonna trigger for it with a different trigger. Let's say unfinished dialog is gonna trigger that same condition with the different trigger. So that's a reason to have them separate, right? That's the reason why we have them as components, as opposed to always doing them within the options, which you can do. It all depends on how you want to run and how you want to script your game. Just showing you the options. And that's it for conditions, triggers, and instructions. That's how they work. You basically you have an event that's going to trigger an instruction or an action, and that action or instruction can have a condition to make it happen, what if it's true or if it's false.